#HOA demanded I remove my lake because it's an eyesore, so I opened the dam and watched. Before we begin, let us know where you're listening from. After the story, rate it from 1 to 10. Now, let's start. I've lived on my property for nearly 20 years. It's a beautiful 5-acre plot nestled in the foothills, with rolling grassland that dips into a natural basin before rising again toward the tree line. When I first bought it, that basin would collect water during the spring thaw and heavy rains, creating a temporary pond that would eventually drain or evaporate by early summer. My name is Zach Atwood, but everyone calls me Zach. I'm a civil engineer by trade, specializing in water management and sustainable infrastructure. After watching that annual cycle of flooding and drying for 3 years, I decided to make something permanent of it. I designed a small earthen dam at the natural drainage point, reinforced it properly, and installed a controlled release valve. Nothing fancy, but it was well engineered and, more importantly, properly permitted through the county. The result was a pristine 1-acre lake that maintained its level year-round. I stocked it with native fish, planted appropriate shoreline vegetation, and created a small dock where I could sit in the evenings with a beer, watching the sunset paint colors across the water's surface. It became home to local wildlife, frogs, turtles, even a family of ducks that returned each spring. For 15 years, it was my sanctuary. Then the development started. The neighboring 100-acre farm was sold to Ridgeline Properties. Within months, the meadows and corn fields were carved into streets and lots. The overlook at Eagle Ridge, they called it. Luxury homes with country charm and rustic elegance. What that actually meant was oversized houses crammed onto half-acre lots with just enough distance between them to maintain the illusion of space. I wasn't thrilled, but I had no right to complain. The land wasn't mine, and development was inevitable as our town grew. I just hoped the new neighbors would appreciate the natural beauty that had drawn me here in the first place. The first few houses went up quickly, including one on the lot that backed up to my property line. The new owners, the Millers, seemed nice enough. They had 2 young kids who were fascinated by my lake, and I was happy to let them fish from my dock occasionally, under supervision. "Mr. Atwood, this is amazing," said Tom Miller one evening as his son reeled in a small bass. "I had no idea this was back here when we bought the place. The sales office just mentioned natural views." I chuckled. "Well, I suppose that's technically true. I've maintained this for 15 years now." "You built this yourself?" he asked, impressed. "Designed it, hired the earthmoving. It was a natural collection basin anyway. I just made it permanent." "Smart thinking. And great for property values, I'd imagine." I nodded, though I had never thought about it that way. To me, the lake wasn't about money, it was about creating something beautiful and sustainable. As more houses were completed and families moved in, I noticed increased activity along my property line. Occasionally, I'd find unfamiliar footprints around my dock or trash near the shoreline. I didn't mind people appreciating the lake from a distance, but I wasn't running a public park. I installed a simple split-rail fence along my property line with small, private property signs. That's when I received the first letter from the Eagle Ridge Homeowners Association. I remember staring at the envelope in confusion. I wasn't part of their development or their HOA. I'd owned my land long before Eagle Ridge existed. Still, I opened it, curious what they could possibly want from me. The letter was signed by Elaine Harrington, HOA president. It cordially requested that I remove my unsightly fencing as it diminished the natural views promised to Eagle Ridge homeowners and negatively impacted the aesthetic harmony of the community. The letter concluded by noting that water features should conform to community standards and directed me to their architectural guidelines. I didn't bother responding. I wasn't subject to their rules, and the fence was on my property. I had every legal right to it. 2 weeks later, a more sternly worded letter arrived, citing multiple complaints about my unauthorized water feature and demanding I attend the next HOA meeting to address these concerns. This time, I did respond, with a brief note explaining that my property predated their development, was not subject to their covenants, and that my lake had all necessary permits from the county. I copied the county planning department and thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Early one Saturday morning, a sharp knock at my door roused me from sleep. I threw on a robe and opened the door to find a small delegation standing on my porch, a thin woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, a balding man in a golf shirt clutching a tablet, and behind them, looking uncomfortable, Tom Miller. Mr. Atwood? I'm Elaine Harrington, Eagle Ridge HOA president. The woman didn't offer her hand. This is Roger Davidson, our architectural committee chair, and I believe you know Tom, who serves on our board. Tom gave me an apologetic half-wave. What can I do for you at? I checked my watch, 7:30 on a Saturday morning. We're here to discuss the multiple violations related to your property, Elaine said, her voice crisp and practiced. Despite our letters, you've failed to address any of our concerns. I leaned against the doorframe. Ms. Harrington, as I explained in my response, I'm not part of your HOA. My property isn't subject to your rules. Roger cleared his throat. Actually, Mr. Atwood, when Ridgeline developed our community, there were provisions in the master plan for adjacent properties. Your pond creates runoff issues and poses safety concerns for children in the neighborhood. It's a properly engineered lake, not a pond. It has no runoff issues because it has a controlled drainage system, and it's on private property that I've now fenced to address any safety concerns. The fence is part of the problem, Elaine interjected. It's an eyesore that violates our community aesthetic. And frankly, so is that stagnant water. It's a breeding ground for mosquitoes and who knows what else. I felt my patience thinning. The water isn't stagnant, it has natural flow and is regularly tested. Again, I'm not part of your HOA. You have no jurisdiction here. We're trying to be reasonable, Elaine continued, her tone suggesting she was anything but. The community expects certain standards, and your project is reducing property values for our homeowners who paid premium prices for natural views, not some amateur fishing hole. That stung. There was nothing amateur about my lake. It was professionally designed, properly maintained, and environmentally beneficial. I think we're done here, I said, starting to close the door. We're prepared to take legal action, Roger blurted. The HOA has retained counsel. I paused. On what grounds, exactly? Nuisance laws. Environmental regulations. Safety ordinances. He tapped at his tablet. We have options. Tom finally spoke up. Zach, maybe we could compromise? The HOA might approve the lake if it meets certain enhancements. Decorative features, perhaps? Professional landscaping? I looked at him, then back at Elaine and Roger. Let me be perfectly clear. My property and my lake are fully compliant with all county regulations. They were here before your development. I'm not subject to your HOA rules. Any legal action would be frivolous, and I would countersue for harassment. Elaine's smile tightened. We'll see about that. Expect to hear from our attorney. She turned sharply and walked away, Roger trailing behind her. Tom lingered. I'm sorry about this. For what it's worth, most of us love the lake. It's just a few vocal people, really. Then maybe the rest should speak up at your meetings, I replied, not bothering to hide my irritation. After they left, I called my friend Diane, who happened to be a real estate attorney. She assured me the HOA had no legal standing but warned that didn't mean they couldn't make my life difficult. HOAs can be vicious when they think someone is threatening property values, she said. Even without legal ground, they can file complaints with the county, generate bad publicity, or just be a constant nuisance. So what do? I asked. Document everything. Check that all your permits are current. And maybe consider inviting the county inspector out for a voluntary review. Get ahead of any complaints they might file. I followed her advice and scheduled an inspection. The county environmental officer, a practical woman named Janet Levitt, spent an hour examining my dam, spillway, and water quality. Mr. Atwood, I wish all private water features were maintained like this, she said as she completed her report. Your design actually improves local drainage and provides valuable habitat. You're fully compliant, and I'm noting that in our system. I breathed easier after that, hoping the official validation would deter the HOA. For a few weeks, it seemed to work. Then came the social media campaign. A newly created Eagle Ridge community safety page began posting about the dangerous, unsightly, and unsanitary pond adjacent to the development. They shared misleading close-ups of normal lake vegetation, calling it disgusting algae. They posted warnings about West Nile virus and drowning hazards. They even claimed, falsely, that my dam was unstable and threatening homes downstream. The campaign escalated when someone flew a drone over my property and posted aerial footage, urging community members to contact county officials about the eyesore in our midst. The comments were vicious, most from people who had never set foot on my land or even seen the lake up close. The final straw came when I received a certified letter from the county. Someone, and I had a good idea who, had filed a formal complaint claiming my lake had been constructed without permits and was causing flooding on adjacent properties. The letter requested that I provide documentation within 30 days or face potential fines and remediation orders. I had the documentation, of course, and submitted it immediately. But the complaint triggered a new inspection, and though the county ultimately reaffirmed that I was in compliance, the process was stressful and time-consuming. Throughout all of this, I noticed increased trespassing. My no trespassing signs were repeatedly vandalized or removed. Twice I found people I didn't recognize walking around my dock, claiming they thought it was community property. Once, I caught teenagers trying to break the lock on my dam's control valve, a potentially dangerous act that could have caused real flooding. When I confronted them, one of the teens said, "Mrs. Harrington said this thing's coming down anyway, so what does it matter?" That evening, sitting on my dock with a stronger drink than usual, I watched a great blue heron hunting in the shallows. The lake had become a thriving ecosystem, more vibrant than I could have imagined when I built it. Now its future was being threatened by people who saw it as nothing more than a liability to their property values. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom Miller. "Heads up, HOA voted to take direct action about the lake situation. Not sure what that means, but thought you should know." I didn't have to wait long to find out. The next morning, I woke to the sound of machinery. From my bedroom window, I could see a landscaping truck parked at the edge of my property and 3 workers unloading equipment. I threw on clothes and rushed outside. "Excuse me. This is private property. What do you think you're doing?" The foreman looked confused. "We have orders to remove invasive vegetation and install decorative border stones around the water feature." "From whom?" He checked his work order. "Eagle Ridge HOA. Ms. Harrington approved it." "This isn't HOA property. You're trespassing, and if you damage anything, it's vandalism." The man frowned. "Look, I'm just following orders. The paperwork says this is common area maintenance." "It's not. Call your office and verify. This is private property." While he made the call, I noticed Elaine Harrington watching from the edge of the development, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding her eyes. The foreman hung up and signaled his crew to pack up. "Sorry for the confusion, sir. Office says to hold off until they sort this out." As they drove away, I walked over to Elaine. "That was criminal trespass," I said evenly. "And attempted vandalism." She removed her sunglasses. "It was a simple misunderstanding. The work order should have been for the community side of the property line. We both know that's not true. This harassment needs to stop." "Harassment?" "We're trying to improve a community eyesore. That stagnant pond is bringing down property values and creating health hazards. It's a properly maintained lake, not a pond, and certainly not stagnant. And again, it's on private property that you have no authority over." The HOA board disagrees. "Our covenants clearly state that all water features visible from the community must meet architectural guidelines. Your covenants don't apply to my property." "I've been patient, but this ends now." The next time you or anyone from your HOA trespasses, I'm calling the sheriff and filing charges." Her smile was cold. "We'll see who the county sides with, one stubborn man or an entire community of taxpayers concerned about their property values and children's safety." That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my house, looking out occasionally at the moonlight reflecting off the lake. The situation had escalated beyond reason, and I needed to decide how to respond. The next morning, I called Diane again and explained what had happened. "That crosses the line into criminal territory," she said. "I can draft a cease and desist letter, but honestly, these types rarely back down. They've convinced themselves they're right." "What are my options?" "Legally? You could seek a restraining order against the HOA representatives. Or file a harassment suit. But those take time and money, and they tend to inflame situations rather than resolve them." I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. There has to be another way. After hanging up, I walked down to the lake and sat on my dock, thinking. The water was clear, revealing small fish darting among the underwater plants. A turtle sunned itself on a half-submerged log. This place had become more than just a project, it was a sanctuary for wildlife and for me. That's when I had an idea. Not the most mature response, perhaps, but one that might make a point. I spent the next week preparing. I checked the county regulations again, reviewed my water rights documentation, and consulted with a hydrologist friend about safe water release rates. I mapped the natural drainage pathways and confirmed what I already knew: any water released from my lake would flow through the natural drainage swale that now ran between several Eagle Ridge properties before reaching the county drainage system. It wouldn't cause flooding or property damage if released gradually, but it would certainly be noticeable. I also installed security cameras around my property and particularly focused on the dam and control valve. I wanted documentation of everything that happened. Then I waited for the right moment, which arrived sooner than expected. A notice appeared on the Eagle Ridge community page announcing a lakefront property tour for prospective buyers, highlighting the natural water views from certain premium lots. The event was scheduled for the following Saturday. That Friday night, I opened the control valve on my dam, not fully, but enough to allow a steady release of water. By morning, the lake level had dropped about 8 inches, exposing a ring of mud around the shoreline. By noon, as the Eagle Ridge tour was in full swing, the water had dropped nearly 1.5 feet, revealing more mud, scattered rocks, and the usually submerged portions of aquatic plants. My phone rang just after 2 p.m. It was Tom Miller. "Zach, did you know your lake is, disappearing?" "Yes, Tom. I'm conducting scheduled maintenance on the dam." "Oh. It's just, there's a lot of mud showing. And Elaine is having a fit because there's a property tour today." "Is that so?" "Well, dam maintenance waits for no one. It's all perfectly normal and in accordance with my water management plan." There was a pause. "This wouldn't have anything to do with what happened last week, would it?" "I don't know what you mean, Tom. I'm just being a responsible water feature owner, ensuring everything is in proper working order. Isn't that what the HOA wanted?" He chuckled softly. "Right. Well, just so you know, there are some pretty unhappy real estate agents right now trying to explain why the lakefront views suddenly include a mud ring. Nature is unpredictable, Tom." By Sunday morning, the lake had dropped by nearly 3 feet, exposing a significant band of muddy shoreline. Right on schedule, I had visitors. Elaine Harrington, Roger Davidson, and 2 other HOA board members I didn't recognize stood at my door, looking furious. "What have you done to the lake?" Elaine demanded without preamble. "Good morning to you too, Ms. Harrington. I'm conducting routine dam maintenance and inspection, as required by my water management permit." "You've created an absolute eyesore," Roger interjected. "There were property tours this weekend." "Yes, I heard about those. Interesting that you were advertising lakefront views of a private lake on private property. Some might call that false advertising." One of the unfamiliar board members, a tall man with a deep tan, stepped forward. I'm Jeffrey Palmer, Eagle Ridge HOA Legal Counsel. This seems suspiciously like retaliatory action. Not at all. It's scheduled maintenance. I'm sure as a lawyer, Mr. Palmer, you appreciate the importance of proper documentation and regulatory compliance. I have all the necessary permits and logs. The timing is hardly coincidental, Elaine snapped. I shrugged. Dam maintenance is seasonal. If you'd like to file a complaint with the county, feel free. I've already notified them of the scheduled water level reduction. How long will this maintenance continue? Asked the fourth visitor, a woman in designer athletic wear. Hard to say. Could be a few days. Might be a couple of weeks. Depends on what I find during inspection. This is unacceptable, Elaine fumed. That mud pit is visible from at least 20 homes. It's affecting property values as we speak. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, not sorry at all. Perhaps in the future, you might want to be more accurate about what amenities are actually part of your development, rather than claiming views of private property as a selling point. We'll be filing a complaint with the county, Jeffrey Palmer stated flatly. As is your right. They have all my documentation on file. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to continue my inspection. As they left, I heard Elaine hiss, "This isn't over." She was right about that, but not in the way she meant. The complaint they filed with the county went nowhere. As I'd anticipated, the Water Management Office confirmed I was within my rights to lower the water level for maintenance and inspection. The Real Estate Office received several complaints from prospective buyers about misleading advertising, forcing them to revise their materials to remove references to lakefront views. For 2 weeks, I maintained the lower water level, meticulously documenting my inspection process. I cleaned debris from the drainage structures, checked the earthen dam for any signs of erosion, and even res-tacked some of the natural stone along the shoreline, all legitimate maintenance activities, if somewhat prolonged. The exposed mud gradually dried in the summer heat, and I noticed something interesting: seeds dormant in the soil began to germinate. What had been submerged lakebed was transforming into a temporary meadow of native wetland plants. It wasn't pretty in a conventional sense, but it was ecologically fascinating. During this time, I received no further visits from the HOA, though I noticed increased traffic on the road behind my property, cars slowing to look at the diminished lake. Some people took photos. A few shook their heads or made disgusted faces. Then one evening, Tom Miller stopped by. "Quite a statement you're making," he said, accepting the beer I offered as we sat on my porch overlooking the shrunken lake. "Just maintenance," I replied with a straight face. He laughed. "Right. Well, it's having an effect. There was an emergency HOA meeting last night." "Oh?" Elaine is furious, of course. But something unexpected happened. A lot of residents spoke up saying the HOA should never have harassed you in the first place. That the lake, even in its current state, is better than having another house there. That the wildlife it attracts adds value to the community. I raised an eyebrow. Is that so? People have been watching birds and animals come to what's left of the lake. Mrs. Davis down the street is an amateur photographer. She's been documenting the herons and egrets that are finding easier fishing in the shallower water. The Henderson kids have been keeping a log of all the different tracks they can spot in the mud. Sounds educational. It is. And it's changed the conversation. Even some board members are questioning Elaine's vendetta against you and the lake. I took a long sip of my beer. Interesting. There's a proposal on the table, Tom continued. The HOA would like to formally apologize for the harassment and unauthorized entry onto your property. In exchange, they're hoping you might consider refilling the lake. Are they now? They're also proposing a cooperative agreement. Nothing binding, but a good faith document acknowledging that while they have no authority over your property, you're willing to maintain the lake as the natural feature it is, and they're willing to respect your property rights and privacy. Elaine agreed to this? Tom grinned. She was outvoted. 17-3. I considered this. What about the eyesore concerns? The safety issues? The property values? Turns out a mud pit actually is worse for property values than a well-maintained lake. And as for safety, the HOA has agreed to fund some tasteful educational signage along the development side, explaining that it's private property but also highlighting the ecological benefits of the lake. I looked out at the diminished water body, now surrounded by a ring of drying mud and emerging vegetation. It had served its purpose, showing the community exactly what they would lose if they continued their campaign against me. I'll consider it, I told Tom. But I'll need the agreement in writing, and I want the social media posts and complaints retracted. I think that can be arranged. A week later, I received the formal letter of apology from the Eagle Ridge HOA, along with the proposed cooperative agreement. It acknowledged my property rights, retracted all complaints, and committed to respecting the boundaries I'd established. In return, I would agree to maintain the lake in its natural state and consider allowing organized educational visits from the local school, supervised and by appointment. It seemed reasonable. The educational component actually appealed to me. I'd always enjoyed explaining the engineering and ecological aspects of the lake to interested listeners. After consulting with Diane to ensure the agreement didn't compromise any of my rights, I signed it. Then, I gradually closed the dam's valve, allowing the lake to refill naturally with the next rainfall. It took nearly a month for the water to return to its normal level. During that time, something unexpected happened. The temporarily exposed shoreline, now covered with young wetland plants, created a transitional zone between water and land, an ecotone rich in biodiversity. As the water rose, some plants were submerged again, but others established themselves along the new waterline, creating a more diverse and visually interesting shoreline than before. The wildlife responded enthusiastically. More birds arrived, attracted by the additional food sources. Frogs and turtles thrived in the expanded habitat. Fish populations boomed with the influx of nutrients from the newly submerged vegetation. Word spread through the Eagle Ridge community. Residents began to appreciate the lake not as a static water feature but as a living ecosystem. Children would wave to me from the development side when I was out on my dock. Some adults would call greetings or compliments about our lake, a phrase that would have irritated me before but now felt like progress. Even Elaine Harrington eventually came around, in her way. She never apologized personally, but she stopped referring to the lake as a pond or eyesore. At the fall community picnic, to which I was surprisingly invited, she made a point of mentioning the natural amenities that made Eagle Ridge special, including views of the adjacent protected wetland habitat. It wasn't technically accurate, my property wasn't a protected wetland, but it was close enough, and certainly better than her previous descriptions. The following spring, I hosted the first official educational visit from the local elementary school. 24th graders and their teacher spent a morning learning about water ecosystems, dam engineering, and the importance of wetlands. We identified plants, spotted wildlife, and tested water quality. Their enthusiasm was infectious. As they were leaving, one boy asked, "Mr. Atwood, why is your lake so much prettier than the ones in the park?" "Because it's not just for looking at," I told him. "It's a living system with a purpose." "What's the purpose?" he pressed. I thought for a moment. To find balance. To create a place where water, land, plants, animals, and people can all benefit from each other. He nodded seriously. "I think it's working." Looking out at the lake, my lake, with its clear water, diverse shoreline, and abundant wildlife, I had to agree. It had taken an act of protest, of controlled destruction, to save it. By showing people what they would lose, I'd help them see what they actually had. That evening, I sat on my dock as the sun set, casting golden light across the water. A family of ducks paddled nearby. Across the lake, I could see a few Eagle Ridge residents on their decks, also watching the sunset. We nodded to each other, not friends, exactly, but no longer adversaries. The lake had found its balance again. And so had we.